Hey, NBT Nation, welcome to another episode of NBT Talks. This is where we go into longer form discussions with training experts to really dial in how we can level up and improve our corporate training. I am thrilled today to have my guest, Dana Sardano, with us. Dana comes to us as an artist, an intuitive counselor, an author, but she also has an extensive career in the education world. So I'm super stoked today. We are going to connect the dots between corporate training and the education world and have what I think is an interesting discussion on, you listen to NBT and all these bits of advice I give, but they're rooted in some really cool science, some really cool educational theory. So Dana, thanks so much for joining me today. I've been really looking forward to this conversation.
Right on. Thanks for
Yeah.
having me.
So let's dive in a little bit. Let's kick it off with this idea. We have talked in the background that corporate training and so much of the things that I talk about, the techniques, the practices, etc., you recognize as you've been trained in. There's an educational theory or a science behind this. Could you talk a little bit about that at sort of a high level before we dive in?
All right. So, as far as the theories, I always joke when I went to teacher college and they taught us all these things. Until you're on the front lines, until you're in the classroom, you really don't understand so much. Um, you really don't understand the theories until you're there. And the one of the things that I saw in you, or I see in you, in everything that you do, in the videos that you do, in the posts that you do about corporate training, I'm always like, oh my God, that's what you do in education. Oh my God, that's what you do in education. And what it really comes down to is it's all just good teaching. It's all how people learn, whether you're 5, 15, or 55, we all learn the same way. And just as one example, when you have something to present to people and they don't have the background vocabulary or the background information or anything to connect to it, remember the teacher on Peanuts? It's like
Yeah.
wah wah wah, right?
Wow.
Yeah. So one of the things that I noticed that you said, and I'm jumping right into it if you don't mind.
To send it.
It's the teacher in the room. This is what we're going to do, and this is how we're going to do it.
I'm sitting up
But
straight now.
but you're understanding that you have to walk people to something. You have to feed people little pieces of information, introduce them to the pieces before you could go into the whole idea. And just that one thing, and just to, again, I hear myself going off, but just to give you an example, when I taught high school for many years, and I taught predominantly English, predominantly history, a little bit of math here and there for differentiated learning styles, but predominantly English and history. But in history, the one thing that I did prior to teaching anything about ancient Rome, ancient Greece, whatever it was, is I would make them do the vocabulary in the book. I would make them outline the sections. I would make them do homework before they were even taught the subject. So when I got in the classroom and I'm talking, they're like, oh, I know this word. And it's not where they have to, define it in their head and figure it out, because then they're lost. And I see that you do that, correct?
Yeah, I mean, you've hit on a couple nuggets. And
Okay.
by the way, just take a brief pause. The goal of this discussion for the audience is to really demonstrate that learning is learning, whether you're in a boardroom or a classroom. So that's the point of this. It's not, oh, NBT is amazing,
Yeah.
although we are.
Yeah.
Um, but yes, to your point, like talk a lot about pre-classroom activities or pre-training training. Here's the vocabulary. Here, what do you know about this already? Here's some sort of activity to complete, so that when they get to the training session, they're already thinking and kind of in that learning mode. And then you touched on learning progression, and definitely I'm big on that. Start small. I see so many corporate trainers just come in and blast
Oh, like
everybody
a
in the face.
machine gun of facts. I've seen
Yeah,
teachers
yeah.
like bah, 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 and the kids are like, I don't even know what time, like where am I?
So talk a little bit about that whole I call it learning progression. I'm sure there's a much more
Yeah.
scientific fancy name for it, but talk a little bit about that idea of sort of walking somebody into a piece of knowledge.
Yeah, so that goes hand in hand with giving them pre-homework. They call that front loading, right? So in the stages, in the way that you learn, first you learn like a definition, right?
Mhm.
This is a cat. And then you learn, okay, the application. Oh, a cat destroys your furniture. Again, I'm just kidding. Like,
He's everywhere.
but a cat does this. These are the attributes of the cat, and you learn a little bit more. And then you learn, okay, how do we apply the cat? Well, if the cat and there's a dog in the house, well, that makes for a lot of entertainment and creation of videos. And I'm just kidding, but like then you apply it, and you're able to really understand it on a broader level. So when you front load, and I'll get to the progression, but when you front load, when you give somebody the vocabulary, because that's everything that we do is creating pictures through words. If I say house, what do you see?
Hmm.
Right?
Right.
You
The
see
house I grew
I
up in.
see the actual drawing. Like I see the stick like figure house, but you see the house. So now if I don't know the vocabulary of house, and now I'm talking about the building of the house and the decorating of the house, if I'm not here, you've lost me.
Yep.
So when you come in with the front loading, you give people, like you said, an activity or an exercise, again, something to do beforehand, you loosen them up, then you can progress. So now you're in there with the vocabulary. This is a house. This is a cat. This is a dog. And now we could graduate to what do we do with the house and the cat and the dog? And then people can be more involved because they're present, they're with you.
Yeah, that front loading piece, or even if you don't front load it in your session itself,
Yeah.
if you're jumping ahead and assuming your audience knows X, Y, and Z about a house, oh my God, you see the blank stares immediately. And I see so many subject matter experts in the corporate world, they get tapped on the shoulder, hey, can you put this training together? And they just come in assuming everybody knows everything that's in their head
Mm.
that took them 30 years to become a subject matter expert on anyway, and they assume everybody is right there with them, and they're like, why are people quiet and glazed over? Well,
Yeah.
they didn't
Yeah.
even know what a house was.
They don't even know. And you know what? You make such a good point because there is this, a lot of people think educating, teaching, training, however you want to look at it, is about me giving you information, me providing you with information. And it's
Nope.
not.
Nope.
It's a dance. It's a relationship. Like you said, the eyes are glazed over. You know how many teachers I have known that can't even see that because they have their agenda and they have their curriculum and they're giving you this information, but nobody is receiving. So this level of communication goes back and forth. If somebody is sitting in a classroom or in a training room and the teacher is not asking questions, it's not asking somebody to share, to give information back to you. If I'm giving you information and I explain something in a couple of minutes, I'm not moving on until I have communicated with you and you've communicated back, and we all know that you're picking up what I'm putting down. Otherwise, there's no point in moving forward because you're building a house, back to the house analogy, on a faulty foundation. Shit's falling down. Oh,
well, it's good to know, I think, in a good way, that teachers also stare at the blanks or see the blank stares in the quiet room.
oh my
Nobody
God,
talking back.
totally. Yeah.
Yeah, so talk a little bit, if you would, on this idea of asking questions and confirming that your audience is with you. And we'll get back to the learning progression stuff, but just from like a straight up classroom management, type standpoint, what were some of the techniques you used to ensure that the class really understood, they were really picking it up before you moved on?
It's funny. There's a way that like is accepted, the way you should do it, and some of
And
the
then
things that I used to
the
do.
Dana way.
Yeah, like if I ask a question, what were some of the signs of the fall of the Roman Empire, right? And like four kids raised their hands. I am calling on the kid who didn't raise their hand.
100%. Yes,
always,
absolutely.
always. But the thing is there's a pro and a con. The con is you don't want to embarrass anybody, make them
For sure.
uncomfortable. But the
Yep.
pro is you do it once. Now you got all their attention. But I think let's just table that. That's just me being an insane person. But
No, there's two of us in this conversation that are insane.
yeah. But the audience engagement is really, really important. How do you know? So if I just did this whole thing on the fall of the Roman Empire and I'm like, something simple like, what was the first one again? Just like, and then somebody repeats it to me. Oh, okay. Now, and then you're talking to them. It's a conversation. So, you mentioned classroom management, right? Because in with adults also, adults are like the worst because they're on their cell phones. They're not kids. They don't have to listen to you. Like I've been a teacher in training by other teachers. Teachers are the freaking worst because there's nothing you can teach us, right? So classroom management is just as simple as you don't have to have rules and holding people accountable to the rules if people are engaged, if they are constantly doing something, if they're constantly responding. It doesn't have to be taking notes. It could be doing an activity. You know what I mean? So you say
Mhm.
a little something and then you have them right, and always have them relate it to themselves. Because if they relate it to themselves, they're now interested, or something that they're familiar with or like.
Isn't it amazing that the second you get them interested, even if the subject matter is, dry and pretty mundane, that you see that spark in their eyes and the conversation starts happening, and the person in the back who you had to call on to get them interested, now they start chiming in. It's amazing. And you're talking about some dumb thing like it's the fall of the Roman Empire, who cares? But now all
Hey,
of a sudden everybody's
hey,
now all of a sudden everybody's, well, you're talking about some corporate procedure that was boring as
hey.
dried paint. But now everybody's chiming in. Oh, I would do this. Oh, I had this experience. And it's amazing how people kind of come alive just by getting them engaged and getting them to see how it relates to them.
100%, because that's all anybody wants to know is how it relates to them. That's really what it comes down to. So when you sit in these trainings, or when a student is sitting in a classroom, it's, oh, this is meaningless to me. Well, let's make it make some meaning. And you know when I had that aha moment. I remember like my early years teaching, and I would like teach my stuff with no front loading, because I had to learn to do that, right? Teaching my stuff, and then I would say something, and I would refer to a movie or something in pop culture, and then all of a sudden, all their little heads would go up because it was something they could relate to. It was something they recognized. It was something they understood. And I was like, oh, if I could apply that connection to what we're doing. And then what I started doing is I started being able to, and I do this even now, I'm not in traditional education anymore, but I'm in education, is I take whatever the subject matter I want to convey, and I make it very, very personal. And usually I use my personal experience, because when I use my personal experience, people can relate their personal experience. Oh, that happened to me. Oh, I had a similar situation. Oh, my mom sucked too. Whatever it is. You know what I mean?
Sounds
And
familiar.
then and then they can take that person, again, it's personal now, it makes sense, and relate it to whatever the subject matter is. You could do that in any subject across the board because we're all humans.
I mean, what great tips we already have here. Front load, get them engaged. I love the Columbo technique, by the way. There's a reference nobody will get.
Old
But
man.
I love all that. Any other engagement techniques that you went to or were go-tos for you?
I think keeping your audience as active as you possibly could, as you
Mm.
possibly can. There is the old way of doing things, or again, in the classroom, where you're teaching something, you're writing on the board, and everybody's trying to make sure their notes are right. But if you give somebody an activity, something that it's active learning. When you learn in education how people learn, that you have the visual learners, right?
Mhm.
You could see something, watch a movie, write something on the board, and people get it, right? The auditory learners, all they have to do is sit and listen. And then you have the kinesthetic learners. They have to do something. It could be as simple or as basic as, I'm watching you write it on the board, visual, I'm listening, and I'm writing it down, kinesthetic. But you know what? I'll never forget the project that I did in the fifth grade, where I was creating one of the colonial houses in colonial Virginia. I'll never forget that, because I physically got to do it. So we all have different learning styles, but most educators or most trainers rely on the visual and auditory. But until you get people involved, And it doesn't have to be a physical project. It could be an actual, they're thinking and they're writing things down. They're actively learning as opposed to passively receiving information.
uh, just had an example recently, was delivering facilitating a training session, and I did a wrap up at the end, and it was the traditional, come to the dry erase board and summarize everything you've learned in the last 2 weeks in pictures. That, sort of tried and true technique. And I had somebody say this was my favorite part of the entire thing, because
Right.
and it's like, if you have a dry erase board and some markers, that's all you need. And it's amazing.
Right. It's funny that you say that. I remember in one of my classes in college, and they had us do something with crayons. We were all sitting around a table, and there was crayons in the center, and we had pieces of paper. And again, it was a normal class, but they had us do something with the crayons. And soon as they handed us a crayon, a bunch of freaking young adults, we were all like, "Yay!" And we, and play with the crayons. It really it I think that there's an underestimation of the child within us that responds to these things. The school that I taught in for the last 16 years of my career, it was a college preparatory institution. It was private school. Everything was focused on getting these kids into college. So the teachers had a haughty way about them. And
Mm.
again, it was very old school, very erudite, writing the things on the board, taking the notes. And I remember being in faculty meetings, because part of my job, I was in the administration, was to mentor teachers as well as work with the children. And I was like, have you forgotten what it's like to have fun? These are kids. They want to be able to color, cut, and paste. It doesn't
Fun.
take away from the learn. Yeah, right.
Fun.
Yeah.
I think I heard of that one time.
Yeah, totally. So let's not forget to, you can engage in the most ridiculous, but freaking puppet shows, sock puppets. Who cares if it gets that information and it's engaging, and you, the person who's giving whatever the presentation is, whatever the training is, are owning it. If you're embarrassed by your sock puppets, but if you go in, you're like, this is what we're doing. Hey, you're Ernie, you're Bert. Let's do this. They will respect whatever it is you tell them to do.
Absolutely. Couldn't agree more. Let's jump back to that whole idea of learning progression and chunking and scaffolding and all that
Mm-hmm.
kind of fun stuff.
Look at
Because
you.
that's a big part of the whole no boring training approach, is you got to start low and slow and just keep layering it on.
Yeah.
As opposed to the fire hose to the face. Talk a little bit, if you would, about like the some of the theory and the adult learning concepts that are behind that, that made it work so well in the education space.
Well, you mentioned chunking, and that's how you're like scaffolding and chunking. I'm like, ooh, look at him know what he's talking about. Right.
Ugh.
The
I can be
fun.
serious sometimes.
Yeah. But as far as the way our brains work, do you know why phone numbers are seven numbers?
I don't know.
Well, now they're 10 because everybody's got an area code, but there's seven numbers because you can remember seven numbers, and it's in 3 and 4. So you can remember the 3 and the 4, and it's just the way our brains work. So when you do things in pieces, and pieces that make sense and correspond with one another, it's easier to learn that. And as we know, when it's easier to learn something, you're more likely going to want to do it. You know what I
For
mean? If
sure.
I'm banging my head against a calculus book, I'm not going to want to go to that class or do the homework.
No.
So you make it fun. You got your sock puppets. You understand how the brain works, and you do it in chunking pieces that correspond with each other, smaller pieces, and then you build on it. And people are invested, they're engaged, because you've made it interesting, you've made it make sense to them, or you made it where it not make sense as much as where they can connect with it. They're going on the ride with you. It's human psychology to want to be involved with something that feels good, want to be involved with something that's obviously interesting and engaging, something that you can connect with, and something that you're learning. People want to learn. You know how when kids go to school, I don't want to go to school, school sucks. Every day I ask my kid, how's school? And they're like, school sucks. People's natural inclination is to want to learn something new. We want to learn. We want to grow as humans. We want to expand our understanding. People hate school and they hate training because it's not ticking all of these boxes where they could connect with it, where it's easy for them. And when the teacher understands that there's no one way to skin a cat, and they apply their natural giftedness and their natural way of wanting to learn and connect, it's amazing how people will respond, you know?
Oh, I couldn't agree more. What keep a little bit of eye on the time here, or else we'll be here
Yeah.
for 5 hours, which I'd
Yeah.
be thrilled with. I don't know about the audit.
Yeah.
NBT Nation may not agree. You touched on the idea of having fun in your previous role, that some of the teachers had kind of lost touch with that.
Yeah.
I see it all the time on the corporate side. You just get so focused on the business side of things that to
Yeah.
come into a training room and sock puppets or whatever is like, oh my God, this is, are we allowed to do that? I don't know. It's so canned and stilted and horrible.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
NBT fights against that. So talk a little bit about having fun while you're learning and how those two fit together.
Oh my God. First of all, people are afraid because somehow, again, in the educational profession as well as corporate, there's a stuffed shirt sort of like fear of. I remember when I first started teaching, I was 22. I was right out of college. I was just dancing on a bar. Right. And then all of a sudden I'm like dressed and I'm like, oh my God, I'm in a classroom
I'm
now.
an
And
adult now.
yeah, oh my God, what did happen? I was going to bed at 6 a.m. Now I'm getting up at 6 a.m. How did this happen? And I felt like I had to emulate like the school marmy person. I'm like, and that lasted like a semester. I'm like, I can't do this. What we need to do is we need to remember, those of us who are in front of the classroom, in front of the training room, that we are who we are, and bringing that is the magic. And when people learn best when they feel safe, right? It's
Hmm.
first thing in Maslow's hierarchy of needs, or physiological needs, safety, security, all that. So they need to feel safe. Okay, we feel safe. This guy's in charge. We're all good. And then their creativity needs to be sparked. Well, how is that? Through fun. And if you come in and you are owning the room as the leader, the educator, then again you can pull off sock puppets because you've already proved your credibility with proper organization, with understanding of the subject matter, with proper classroom management that is of empowerment, but not draconian at the same time. You know what I
Right, right.
mean?
Yeah.
So once you get all that established and everybody knows why we're here and what the expectations, set expectations, right? If I was with adults, kids, don't even let me know you own a cell phone. But
Mhm.
if I was with adults, I would be like, okay, we all need to be explained to them. We all need to be in attention here. We're all here for a common purpose. We all need to be present. I'm asking that you turn your phones off. I will watch you turn your phones off. Now you know I'm in charge because I'm watching you. I will watch you turn your phones off. Put them in your bag. We will have an opportunity, again, setting expectations. We will have an opportunity. We're in 20 minutes. We're going to take a 5-minute break because, again, you don't want to do anything more than 15, 20 minutes. People want to blow their brains out, right? So in
Hmm.
20 minutes, you'll have an opportunity, if you have children, if you're to check your phone. But we can all agree that you could do 20 minutes without checking your phone. We're all here. We're all present. You guys with me? Make them respond or encourage them. Right? Okay. Don't be draconian. Make them respond, but
You'll have to go to
encourage.
HR if you win.
Right? Yeah, you will respond, but encourage them to respond. So we're in this thing together, and then you could take out your sock puppets, do whatever, because you have now established your role. You made it clear what their expectation is, and now you could have fun. Now, if you've come across this way and you bust out with a sock puppet, I don't know what the hell is happening, but they're ready, and they're so psychologically, when we feel safe, when we've loosened up, when we excite our creativity, and when we're laughing. Oh my God. Oh, can I say one more thing? I just want to
Yeah,
say one more thing. I
please,
hear
please.
myself going off on a tear. I always think about when I am like in a social setting, and somebody I know, I go to introduce somebody. It could be like my dearest friend, and because of that anxiety of that situation, I will forget their name, right?
Instantly, yes.
Instantly. Like, this is my husband. No, not Bill, not
No,
Bill. Not, you know
no.
what I mean? Yeah, yeah, yeah. Rod. This is my husband, Rod, right? So, but it's the anxiety of that social situation. It's the anxiety of the pressure of having to introduce. It happens so quickly, but it's the anxiety is why I forgot the name. So think about when we have people in a classroom. or in a training room. It is laced with anxiety. You have to
Mhm.
know this. This is important. This is what you need to remember. And you're hitting all of the pieces that create the opposite environment for learning. You take away the anxiety, you bring forth the fun, the humor, the entertainment. People don't even know they're learning, right?
Sneak it
So
on it.
you sneak it in, you sneak it in. That's why all these shows for kids are all cartoons, they're brightly colored, they're puppets, or all these things. But these kids are learning. So that's really the importance of the fun. Again, establish safety, establish the expectation, and then you have a good time. They won't even know. They won't be looking at their phones. They won't be looking at their clock because everybody's having a good time. And it doesn't have to be slapstick, doesn't have to be circus or a party, but enough to engage, to tickle their brain a little bit.
Yeah, and it's interesting too, like you say, it doesn't have to be a Las Vegas show.
No.
And as soon as you make it clear that you're in that safe environment, I'm a big believer in that too, that like I'm here to help you, guide you. You have to do the work, but I'm
Yep.
going to be there with you step by step because we want everyone to be successful here at Acme Incorporated.
Yep.
Um, when people believe that you're on their side, that you believe in them and you're a partner in this process, it makes the whole thing go. And then you drop a couple little jokes or, like you say, do something fun, whatever your version of fun is. Oh my gosh, people relax. They
Yeah.
start to be like, oh, okay, cool. I can do this horrifically boring procedure. Okay, let's
Yeah.
dive in now.
Yeah, oh my God. It's such a good point. And I can't believe it took us this long to get to this point because I think that this is the most important thing about them knowing, whoever it is on the other side of that table or the other side of that desk, them knowing that you are on the same team. And I've seen it. I've seen it over and over. Part of my job again in that last 16 years, it was like twofold. I was in the classroom, I was mentoring teachers, but I was in charge of discipline as well.
Oh,
So I got to see kids in my classroom that also were behind that were in my office for discipline from other teachers. So I got to see all the different angles. And I taught differentiated instruction. So I taught kids that had learned throughout their high school or through their schooling career, their educational career, that there was something wrong with them and they couldn't learn the way everybody else was learning. Right. And I had to understand why they learned or how they learned, and then, find the right key, find the right key, and find the right key. So behavioral management was a big part of it, and understanding learning styles and all of that. And what was interesting is they responded to me so well because they knew that I was championing their cause. I was fighting for them in the classroom and outside the classroom. And there was such a great dynamic. They knew I was in charge and they respected that, but at the same time, they knew I was in the trenches with them as well. And it was a really, really it was really, really important that they know that I cared about them. The same kid would be in my office from another teacher. Oh, that teacher hates me. That teacher doesn't like me. That teacher's so hard. That teacher doesn't care. I told that teacher that I needed help and such, and they blew me off. And that disconnect between whoever's in front of the classroom and whoever's in the classroom is huge. We all want a cheerleader. So to be in the training room and where nobody wants to be other than the trainer, if the trainer even wants to be there, but nobody wants to be there. Like, oh, we got to check this off, or HR, or whatever it is. And you come in and say, listen, we're all in this together. We're going to have fun with this. I want you to learn. I want you to be able to do this. I want this to be more than, 90 minutes you'll never get back. I want that to be this. It changes everything. Everything. It's awesome.
yeah, and I think a good place to wrap up, although I think there should be a part two to this for sure, is that idea, and you said it a while back, of it's not about what I'm here to tell you, it's what you need to learn to be successful doing XYZ. And I'm here to help you find that success. And I
Yeah.
think especially subject matter experts, and I go back to that a lot because in a corporate environment, oftentimes training is delivered by non-trainers, by non-full-time trainers.
Yeah.
They're subject matter experts. They do 50,000 different things for their job role, one of which includes training. So I come back to that a lot, is that it's not about you telling people what they need to know. It's about them helping them to learn what they need to know to be successful. And I think on the education side, you just shared a beautiful story of how that's so essential to learning.
Yeah, yeah. And I tell you, Adam, I've seen you in social media. I've seen the how you present and the things that you do, and that's why I'm so taken with what you do. And I've even commented on some of your posts that from somebody again who's in traditional education. I've been out of traditional education for about 7 years, but for almost 25 years in traditional education, I've seen all of the just all the pitfalls. I've seen good teaching, I've seen all of it, and then I watch you and I'm like, this guy, he knows what he's talking about. He understands the principles of good teaching, of what assists a learner in learning. And without, again, I'm assuming you don't have an educational degree, right?
No, business, marketing.
But
Yeah.
yeah, so it's your natural understanding of human nature, of the human being, of all of the things that you point out, like all of the points that you brought up. There is like a rule to that. There is a reason for that. This is the basis of the conversation, and you definitely you prove in what you do in your training that teaching is a gift. We can learn whatever we want in the classroom, but either you have the gift or you don't. And you're right about the subject matter teachers. Like I had a chemistry teacher in high school. He knew chemistry, he didn't know how to teach.
Hmm.
And so to assist trainers in how to, or assist people in how to properly train, it's a gift to these organizations for sure.
Well, you're very kind, and I appreciate you sharing that. Unfortunately, I had to learn all of these tips, tricks, and procedures through dumb luck and awkwardness and a whole boatload of mistakes. Because you talked about your first semester in, being the very school marm.
Yeah,
Yeah, I look back at some of my early training sessions because I've been doing training either purposely or not realizing it all throughout my working career.
yeah,
And I look back at some of those early sessions and I made all the classic mistakes. I
yeah,
came in, I told everybody what they were supposed to know. I'm decent at oratory and oh, let me show everybody. And oh God, I did everything horribly wrong. I went to a train the trainer workshop from the American Management Association, give them a free plug. And that's when I realized, oh my God, I am
I
doing this
suck.
so wrong.
I'm so
So I went back to my hotel
bad.
room. It was in Washington, D.C. I went back to my hotel room questioning all my life choices up to that moment. That's like garbage. But like you say, learning is learning, whether you're in a boardroom or a classroom. And that's why I wanted to get together today to talk about, it for a variety of reasons. One is if you're on the corporate training side, this episode, go back and rewatch it. Dana has just shared amazing tips that you can take and replicate to make your training sessions far more effective. The secondary reason for this conversation, I hope, is that if you're in the education world and you're thinking about a pivot over to the corporate side for whatever reason, it's not as big a jump as you might think it is. Learning is learning, and you can go to a business and take all that teacher college stuff,
Yeah,
put it in business language, and be very attractive to a hiring manager and to a corporation. So if you're thinking of making a pivot, hopefully this episode will kind of help you see that it ain't that big of a difference. It is no difference really. You got adult
yeah.
children and children. I
Children,
mean,
children.
same thing. So hopefully those two purposes of this discussion were met today. Dana, thanks for taking time out of your busy morning. Uh, Check out Dana Sardano, follow her online, intuitive coaching, artwork, author. Her show Going Commando with her co-host is fabulous. Definitely recommend that. She's got a book out, Decoding the Woo Woo. You can Google that, find that online. I'll put links in the comments section below as well. But Dana, thanks for taking your time out of your day. Absolutely fabulous conversation. And thanks for joining me here on NBT Talks.
All right.